All good to go on my end, Smelly?
I think we're all good to go. We're ready to rock.
Cool. We're live.
All right, Super Brain, what's going on? And what are some of your initial thoughts about the sugar diet, sugar fasting that I have going on?
Well, you know me. I've been super braining, doing a lot of cool stuff. The nonprofit, which I've told you about extensively in the last year, is doing a soft launch this weekend, a hard launch in the upcoming, which will be cool. As you know, I've been doing a little bit of the sugar diet, if you will, for a while now, as like in my new adult phase of eating and dieting, if you will. Because back when I was cutting for Strongman and the Performance Vibe was a big coaching platform, something similar is how we did all of our weight cuts. Like at the very end, you would bring the protein down, the essential fats down as well, but very targeted in when and how you'd eat them. And then I used to use the 80-20 rule. You're either going to go 80% fruit, 20% sugar, or invert that 80-20 for your energy based on what you're doing during the day. And had a lot of successful weight cuts that way. And it was funny, we approached it that way for performance, right? It was like, this is how you train hard still, get the recovery done, and move on. And it's been a different ride in the sense of like, I always did that to make weight. And then if you weren't cutting weight, you weren't eating that way for that time being. So it's been fun, like kind of circling back later in life.
Let's talk. I want to talk to you, and one of the reasons I want to talk to you specifically is like I just feel like you know a lot about organs and organ health and organ optimization. Because when you and I have worked together in the past, and even more recently, where you just made suggestions to me and so forth, you talk a lot about like blood pressure and just health, like health optimization alongside of performance optimization. And I always say like you're the ultimate amplifier. You're able to like look at a situation and then you're able to amplify it, but you also think of the consequences. So I think it's really important to point out with people sugar diet, sugar fasting, these different protocols that we use for fat loss, for weight loss. It might not be a good idea to do them in perpetuity. Like it might not be a good idea to do them forever. And I've been on a long journey down from 330, but it started, 12 years ago. So I think 12 years is like a reasonable amount to work on losing, over 130 pounds. But anyway, I wanted to get into this idea of if you can explain kind of what's happening, you think, with this diet in terms of the liver, because it seems like we're putting some stress and some just, I guess, pressure, you'd say, maybe on the liver in a way. But then that's giving us like a pretty good amplified reaction in the right direction for now.
Yeah, I think the first thing with all diets we need to keep in mind is, especially when the goal is to get weight off relatively quick, you are putting some type of like compensatory actions in play. Like you're doing something hard on your body on purpose. And it might just have a positive connotation because you're choosing to do it to yourself, but that comes in everything. So every compensation, you will, that you're looking for in a diet is more fat loss, more usage of that fat when it comes out of the adipocyte, and hopefully doing it in an effective and efficient enough manner that we don't restore those liberated triglycerides from the adipocyte back in your body. That's the goal of every single fat loss diet ever. And you could get there in many different ways. So I think the first thing to recognize with like a carbohydrate based diet, which is probably the more accurate term, if you will, is that when we are eating, let's say, a lot of fructose at once. There's been a lot of studies done and just general textbook information as well on what does it look like when we digest 30 to 50 grams of fructose at once, which is a good bit. For example, I think an apple is like 5 or 6 grams of fructose on average. It's all like depending on the apple and the size and when you picked it. But
If
let's
you
just
have
say
juice, you'll get
randomly
there.
five.
If you have juice, you'll get there faster. Right?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So that's like 6 apples, let's say, at least, if not 10 apples. Like 30 to 50 grams of fructose is a lot. And there's stages that we're going to go through, and I'll kind of run through them real quick. First is in like the small intestine and the enterocyte. Um, let's say we had 50. We're going to lose, it's called escaping, roughly 15% of that initial 50 in what we call the first pass through. And it has to do with going through the liver and everything. But the small intestine is where food utilization for the majority of everything really goes down. we have two really important enzymes here that are going to be universal in the liver and in the enterocyte. We have ketohexokinase and we have fructose 1-phosphate. Now, these are crucial enzymes, just like any other enzyme, right? If you're trying to lose weight, you want fat loss, you want hormone sensitive lipase to do a lot of work for you. Enzymes are crucial. Not having enough enzymes, which we will talk about later, is the barrier of entry for, say, the diet here. Things go wrong when we can't do what we're supposed to do. So I'm covering what's supposed to happen when you eat a ton of fructose. Most of it comes through after that. It goes through the portal vein. And then when we get to the liver is where we get some more good stuff. In the enterocyte, we get some glucose and some other potential energy. But it has to go through that again, like I said, into the portal vein, the liver. At the end phase of this absorption in the liver, that's where we get carbon dioxide and ATP. We can store it as glycogen. We can go through de novo lipogenesis, which is the production of triglycerides from endogenous or other materials, and we can subsidize our glucose levels. The reason this is really cool is because normally when we eat sugar, it's more unregulated, and glucose in general is unregulated. We can go from very small millimoles to very large millimoles in our blood. Whereas with fructose, even with that large amount of 30 to 50 grams, it never really changes above 1 millimole. 0.2 is your average. So let's say the whole range for fructose consumption might only change 5-fold. Whereas glucose, as we know, your glucose levels can get up 3, 4, 500s, in some diabetic patients. So the range just being tighter tells us the body is probably more effective and efficient at handling it if everything goes right in a surplus state. Plus, we also have the Cori cycle. Good old Cori cycle is the usage of glucose and lactate, like in a circle, if you will, between the muscles and the liver. So as that liver gets better at doing all the liver jobs, it can create a relationship with the muscles and physical activity that might be even better than, part of the problem with a lot of people on low carb dieting is exercising and being physically active, where if you experience those symptoms, the carbohydrate-based diet can alleviate that for you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I know, people probably don't realize this, but your side gig, you are a comedian, and you you left a funny joke on my one of my Instagram posts. You wrote de novo lipogenesis, and I had a good laugh. But most people most people don't understand your humor. Now, what is de novo lipogenesis? And because my understanding of it is you are kind of turning, I guess, carbohydrates, or maybe in this case glucose, into fatty acids. And that sounds like bad news. That sounds like bad news for most people, because isn't that sort of the start sometimes of like fatty liver? And isn't that sometimes the starting place of diabetes? But maybe that's not the case with what we're doing, because our protein is low and our fats are low.
It's more of what we have to call the fates of it. There's no absolutes in biology or health or really life at all, right? There's never 100% success of failure or guaranteed success, right? There is no absolute. So if you had zero glucose, we can't even get there in the first place. 40, 30 is really where people start to pass out for the most part. Same with triglycerides. You can't get that to zero. And we know that having it ultra low is probably not super good. Having it ultra high is not great either. But what we want is, and this is again going back to the goal of every diet, is to be able to handle the energy, which is carbs and fats. Protein doesn't do a whole lot for energy. We want to be able to handle the energy we take in optimally, because obviously we need to eat food for energy, but the goal of fat loss is to burn a little bit of what you got. And that's why it tends to be a good idea to either pick fats or pick carbs, especially if you're early on or you're struggling, to eat the balanced diet. Balanced diets are great for people who've been killing it for years and may not have extreme goals, but that's actually an incredibly small amount of the population. Most people who are killing it have extreme goals, and most people who are trying to get somewhere aren't already killing it, It's also just easy to kind of go through different ways of eating throughout the year, every few years, like you've said, Smelly. So when it comes to the carbohydrate-based diet here, the thing you need to get in check and understanding de novo lipogenesis is I need to produce triglycerides because I'm probably not eating a ton of them. The ones that are likely in my blood are either from circulating adipocytes or fat cells that I've liberated with hormone sensitive lipase and norepinephrine, or de novo lipogenesis. So let's say you're on a low carb diet. We're doing a version of de novo lipogenesis, if you will, for sugars. We have to produce what we don't have. And that, like I said, sometimes a good thing. Compensatory adaptation is what's helping you get the fat off. In both scenarios. So de novo lipogenesis, to shorten up that answer, is the production of a triglyceride from a non-triglyceride source because you did not consume it.
How would you hack this particular diet protocol for people that are kind of looking at it and they don't want to do it, they don't want to like commit to it, but they want to try like some version of it? You know, some of the things I'm recommending are people to the beginning of the day, and once it becomes dinner time, they can break the sugar fast with a lean meat and some starch. How when you start thinking about these things, you start thinking about people working out and wanting to hold on to muscle. How would Superbrain go about hacking some of this and still keeping it optimal while somebody could still potentially lose some weight?
I think the big part there is barrier of entry, right? Like the barrier of entry for ultra low carb dieting is a little lower, and that as long as you get it in, the physical activity is a wonderful amplifier, but not quite necessary per se. This diet gets drastically more potent when you can combine that type of stuff with exercise. So the reason it worked so well for weight cutting and getting lean with my strongman, powerlifting, and bodybuilding clients back in the day when we used it was because it wasn't a question as if you're going to train less. It was like, hey, now this is just what you're eating instead. You still have this stuff to do. You still have to hit the gym, do your jumps, and do your cardio. If you can do that and you're already used to physical activity at least 5 to 7 days a week, that's more than half the battle. Once you're in that state, I think it's important to make sure that you're never killing yourself and you're living to fight another day, because exercising and the glucose up and down effect of the sugar style diet or the low fat carbohydrate diet is going to benefit hormonally, enzymatically, and in every way from exercise, which is essentially, in all senses, especially resistance training, pulling sugar away from your liver and muscles. So as we've talked about, Smelly, I believe in the two-coin theory. Your training and nutrition should be synergistic. If you're eating carbs, you should be doing some type of carbohydrate-based exercise, which matches well with what most people think is a good idea. Like, not everyone goes for a long run and gets the feeling of someone who enjoys that. Most people feel like they've done something just if they work as hard as they can and are pouring sweat. So if you just do some random HIIT work and go work out hard 20 reps at a time in the gym for 40 minutes only, let's say, or even 30 minutes, that's drastically amplifying your carbohydrate or sugar diet, if you will, because of their synergy, like I've spoken about in the past. And I think that's one of the fantastic ways to do it. Along with that, chromium is going to be the most important mineral for this diet. It's the mineral cofactor for the insulin receptor. Not that insulin is mega high here, depending on how you eat, but more importantly, it's like that crucial support WD-40 for the squeaky door that you're using quite often, right? So chromium will also let you eat more and exercise more, because no one can exercise a lot on just ultra low food in the first place. Nice thing about carbohydrate diets are that you could kind of eat a little more food, especially because the protein needs don't have to be quite as high as they do to match out some of the low carb pros and cons. So then you can do some really cool exercise, do it often, and only get more benefits.
If someone is to do a sugar fast for, let's say, like a week, like that's what I'm doing right now, but me aside, because I use performance enhancing drugs, if somebody's doing a sugar fast for like a week, 2 weeks, they have excess body fat, they have a good 40, 50 pounds to lose. Do you think there's a lot of concern over losing some muscle mass?
At that body composition, 40 to 50 pounds of body fat to lose, I wouldn't say so, especially because there's a lot of natural muscle sparing effects that occur by just participating in exercise. We'll definitely lose it if we push it too far. But to be quite fair, most people who are 40 to 50 pounds overweight aren't pushing exercise too far. You know what I mean? Not in an insulting way to anybody. It's just a typical habit, right? And if you do, then you have a whole different subset of problems. But I think for someone doing that, along with it, you should promise yourself 7 days of resistance training. And like limit it, never more than 40 minutes, never less than 20. But that synergy is the secret there, and it'll allow you to get more benefits thereafter. I think a lot of times with like fasting type things or short challenges, people are even the Ozempic classic question. I'll never forget how perplexed I was when someone asked me that the first time. It's like, what do I do next? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you do next? Like your life isn't coming to an end because this is over. Like the next step is progress from here. And I think it's easy to continue progress from that type of approach because everyone's different. Some people don't feel good on the higher amounts of carbs. I think some people overdo it. Like sugar can be dense in carbs really fast, whereas if you're eating like kiwis and stuff, it's so much easier. There is room and positive benefits to sugar on a high carbohydrate diet. The same way fats. Fats have so many different types of effects. That's what you're leveraging, if you will, on the low carb diet. It's almost like knowing what the superpowers are in the diet you're using and leveraging them positively.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention, this is something I've been trying to mention on every episode that I put out. Fruit first, like literally fruit first. Even if you're going to drink some juice, this is post-workout. I got this like watermelon juice right here. It's 100 calories. It's not a huge deal, but I had a banana beforehand. So even just the chewing of fruit, especially the more fibrous fruits, a banana actually has like a little bit of starch, and that's why I chose to use it post-workout, because the starches require a little bit of insulin, and you can talk about that in a minute as well. But I think it's important for people to like actually chew their food and not just, drink juice and not just, have just sugar water and honey and candy. I think that those things, for most people, not for everybody, for most people, it's probably going to make you not feel so good, especially if you have nothing to do. So if I've had a couple people reach out and they're like, hey, the energy's too high. Like I work a desk job, bro, but they just drank like 3 Cokes, and the Coke has, tons of high fructose corn syrup along with caffeine. And so they're just sitting there like friggin' amped. And so I think that those faster acting sugars are probably best placed before a run, best placed before a long walk, best placed before a workout. But what are some of your thoughts on that as well? Because I like what you're saying. Like, hey, let's just encourage everyone to try to get in some resistance training every day. Like that's a great add-on to this, because when you do work out, you feel exponentially like incredible. And again, that's coming from me. This is my own perspective. I've been keto, low carb, carnivore-ish for so long that my experience might not be the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, and a small point there before I get to the real part of the question. It's all about what you're primed and prepared to do. This is it for people who have been low carb for a long time, especially like yourself, Smelly. That was a really smart decision for you to do next. When I was in my internship at Elite FTS, it was one of the greatest learning experiences I've had. I heard Dave Tate say to someone, "You can't pin bone." And it's funny because it's very true. But what's more true than that is like the analogy. Obviously, it was somewhat of a joking insult, to someone using PEDs and not having enough muscle. But that's kind of like the sugar concept. Like, it's liver glycogen versus muscle glycogen. Liver glycogen will prefer. I did it on. This is my left side, but it's your right side. That's why I did it there. But this is really where mine is. Is preferential to fructose. When I already kind of talked about that, right? Like through that digestion of fructose. It's a very small range, so we pretty much use all of it, right? That's preferential to the liver. Whereas when we eat sugars, they're going to hopefully, through insulin and plasma amino acids, be more preferential to work with muscle. So the less resistance training you do, the less muscle you have, the less you've trained your body to use glycogen, glucose, like to deplete it and replete it, the less sugar you're going to be able to consume. You know, I don't weigh that much. I'm on the smaller side stature, but just from being an athlete my whole life and the way I train, I respond to the sugar stuff quite well. You know, and it doesn't have to be that you have to be on PEDs or that you have to be ultra jacked. It's like, can you use this molecule, like I said? And using sugars properly is just slightly harder, if you will, than using fats properly from an idiot proof standpoint.
Mm.
If you're exercising and you care a little bit more about yourself than baseline, it is an easier diet for a lot of people to follow. But it's again, it's just not idiot proof in that you can just sit on the couch all day and do nothing and you'll get the results you want. Not saying you can do that on keto, but you see what I mean. But the barrier of entry is a little different here.
Is there like specific type of workouts you think that kind of fit this sugar fasting, sugar diet protocol?
Great question. I think if you're really bad at it and it's hard for you and it's new, keep the glycogen in your liver. Meaning, if it's brand new for you, do super easy resistance training, and that's pretty much it. I think as you become more advanced, you can go ahead and start to shrink that liver glycogen amount because that's the driver of results in low carb diets. Liver glycogen gets low, we get a blood norepinephrine response, wonderful driver of lipolysis. The mechanism of action for losing fat here is slightly different. So once you get good at it, then you can deplete some liver glycogen with cardio or hard, heavy breathing HIIT training, kettlebells or ultra high reps, and even varied exercise and exercising a lot. But at first, make it easy on yourself and your body to meet the metrics. Like you tell people quite often, lose 5 pounds. I almost don't even care how you do it, but lose 5 pounds and keep it off. So at first, if it's hard for you, just go to the gym and participate, make it easy, and then maybe add some stuff like cardio. Cardio depletes liver glycogen. Breathing heavy, depleting ourselves of oxygen will deplete liver glycogen faster and faster. Whereas when we do, let's call it just easier resistance training, it's a little bit of muscle glycogen and less on the liver.
Yeah, I wrote out this protocol. I did 2 different protocols. Again, these are all things just trying to encourage people to like kick this thing off. Obviously, you could sugar fast, which is fruit juice, honey, maple syrup, candy, and straight sugar, and combinations thereof. And you can do that for a day or two, or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on the person. And as you mentioned, the heavier somebody is, maybe the more body fat that they have, maybe a little bit of the less worry they have to worry about that body composition getting worse. But my advice throughout this has been maybe every like 3 to 5 days, kind of almost no matter what your body composition is, it'd probably be a good idea to take a little break from this sugar diet and break it up with some lean meat and some starch, and then you could put it back on repeat. And I think if you actually, what you said about the 5 pounds is that's something I've been advising for years. Like lose 5 pounds, see what happens. Lose 5 pounds, see what happens. And reevaluate every 5 pounds, even if you have 150 or 200 pounds to lose, or you just have 10 pounds to lose. Take 5 pounds off and then kind of reassess, like how's your energy? How's the scale? Did you lose 5 pounds in 2 days, or did you lose 5 pounds in 5 days? You know, it's important to like really learn this stuff and learn how your body's feeling as you're going through this process. So I advise people to just break it up a little bit, and that way your diet is a little bit more well-rounded. When you have a diet that has fruit and starch and lean meat, it's like, really, what else is there? The only thing I can think to maybe add in there would be maybe some dairy or something like that. One thing that you mentioned to me, which I think is a really great point, you said, hey, if you're going to eat fat or if you're going to eat protein, let's make sure it's awesome because I've lowered it all, right? And that's actually an interesting thing about this diet. I don't know if it's going to work the same for everybody, but for me, so many of the cravings, so many of the wanting to just eat like junk food are gone. When it's time for me to eat, it's time for me to eat protein. I'm really now thinking about the good stuff, the stuff that's going to give, because I know that I'm lacking it. I know that I need good sources of protein. I need a steak shake. I need the total carnivore shake. I need the lean meats. I need essential fatty acids and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we always supplement for what we don't have, right? Like if you're on the low carb diet, when you do eat carbs, you should get some astaxanthin in there, maybe some probiotics and prebiotics that you wouldn't normally consume the same of, maybe throw some flavonoids and glucosides in there. And that's because you're missing those, right? And then on the carbohydrate-based diet, when you get your fats, that's when you want to get in your fat-soluble vitamins. Maybe some like fat-based molecules that you may be ingesting. I know there's a lot of people on this podcast that take PEDs. Oral steroids and fat go together. Oral steroids and the lack of fat do not go together. If there's oral steroids with no fat, you oftentimes need glycerol monostearate or something else to help it move.
Which is over the counter.
Yes, absolutely.
Monohydrate over the counter. You can get it off Amazon.
Yep. And that's kind of the concept. So here, and I've noticed the cravings I think are less as well for people that tend to want to eat a lot, like volume. Some people are small eaters, and that's why low carb is great because you don't got to eat much. But for me on the low carb diet, I eat like a pound of beef and some vegetables, and I'm like, what's next? Whereas when you're eating like a lot of fruit, there's so much more water in what you're eating. It's not so nutrient dense. Like 300 grams of just what we'll call assorted fruit is quite a bit. Whereas like 300 grams of meat just doesn't feel like that much food. You know what I mean? Like I think that's a big portion there. But in this scenario, when you eat the fats, when you do, they should be high in EFAs, whether they're grass-fed or from crustaceans. These are where you can get some grapeseed oils if you train a lot. Like the organic good kind. And what you would want to look to supplement here in the carbohydrate-based approach, and what you're missing out, if anything, is more making sure that you are able to digest those fats when you do get them properly and nourish yourself with them. Just like the carbohydrate. The risk to the keto diet is sure you're quote unquote more insulin sensitive, but when you put carbs in your stomach, they don't work like they should. I think that's a great way to troubleshoot any diet is, can I step into the water of the stuff I'm not doing good at and have an appropriate response or not? So when you break that sugar fast, you should still be able to eat your grass-fed beef or like your fattier cuts of fish and nuts with no problems. I think that's a great way to track your progress. Like let's say you start with 24 hours and you're good to go and you want to go to 48 or however you want to make that progress. It's a great way to understand if you're capable and overcompensating or undercompensating, because every diet has some negatives. There is a glucocorticoid potential here, like cortisol and stuff related. Just way there's a adrenaline, adrenergic, cholinergic risk, if you will, with some, you could be like overly stimmed out very easily on the low carb diet. So there's perils to both, and that's why you supplement for what you don't get.
That's a great point. Everyone can think to their low carb days, or if they're still doing low carb and carnivore and stuff, and just think about how much caffeine and how much coffee you're leaning on and relying on, how much of those stimulants. And then for a lot of people that have tried this diet, they've been able to kick some of their caffeine habit. They've been able to reduce their Monster energy drinks and their caffeine and so forth. What are your thoughts on things like choline, things like TUDCA? Like, what are your thoughts on some maybe supplemental things for the liver, or just even maybe some glucose disposal agents of some sort, or metformin? I get a lot of questions about metformin because all the meatheads are like, how do we amplify this more? And my answer so far has been like, hey, why don't we just chill? Like, why don't we just do the diet and get used to it and to get good at it? That's something I learned from you, was like, when you're switching over to this new dietary intervention, you might not be that good at it. And I kind of like to let the body sort of do its own thing. You did mention chromium, and that's interesting, and that's just a natural element, and that's something that is very easy to supplement. So I don't see anything wrong with a little bit of that. Maybe berberine plays into some of this, but what are your thoughts there?
Certainly. I think the first thing is making sure your glucose levels are intact. I like to make progress, not put out fires. So like you should be taking chromium because you're, man, I went to the gym twice today, or went for a run and went to the gym, and I'm crushing 800 grams of carbs, let's say. Like that, you want to take chromium because you're using your body's glucose systems a lot. You don't want to take chromium because you just had like a 200 gram of carb, fruit smoothie shake and then sat on the couch and did nothing. So that's what I mean by like keeping it intact. Like, are you doing this to fix, like, we all have like these little like things we do we know we shouldn't. We manipulate information, like, oh, I'm on the sugar diet, I'm gonna eat a whole bag of Swedish fish right before bed. And like, sure, you can maybe sneak some things off, but we never want to use knowledge for evil. So that being said, honestly, I think everyone should supplement choline all the time. There's really no negatives. As I've said many times, surplus choline oftentimes activates our muscarinic receptors in the nervous system, which help turn on your vagus nerve. So I think choline is just a great option all the time. And especially like stimulants and low carb diets go together because of the adrenaline response. Doesn't go together quite the same as many people may have noticed with carbohydrate based diets. So that being said, things that foster GLUT protein. So GLUT5 is what we use for fructose. We use other GLUT proteins for glucose and muscle cells and all that stuff like GLUT4. We want to upregulate those guys when we supplement. Berberrine's a great one there. Happens at low doses. You don't got to be taking like a gram or 1,500 milligrams of berberine or, 200, 300 milligrams of dihydroberberine to get that GLUT effect. It happens pretty low. Exercising does a really lot for this. And also, I think a great thing to toss in here is the functional mushroom group and adaptogens, but mainly just like the functional mushrooms goes really, really well with enhancing some of the effects of the carbohydrate-based diet. I don't think TUDCA is a bad idea for anybody, but I do believe you want to be able to handle de novo lipogenesis and all these liver pressures on your own. That excess pressure should come in terms of only the person who shouldn't be doing it, or you're kind of doing the diet wrong. Just like anything, like diacylglycerol is an intermediary that can be pretty bad sometimes. But we can have diacylglycerol problems on low carb and high carb diets. If you're already eating a lot of fruit, I think astaxanthin is a great antioxidant. It's been shown to enhance its function when we consume it with whole food ascorbic acid or even supplemented ascorbic acid. Vitamin C and astaxanthin are similar chemically in their structure-activity relationship, but they don't cancel each other out. They actually facilitate each other. So a great antioxidant choice for fruit consumption diets is astaxanthin. I think the glucosides and flavonoids, like cyandin 3 glucoside was one of the ones that got made famous through blueberries. Like you're already taking in a bunch of this stuff. Not a bad idea to add some of them, get extra out of it. EGCGs, a catechin. That's a wonderful support for this diet as well.
Is there an issue? I learned this from Joel Green. He kind of talked about how, not necessarily with this diet, but he did mention people that blast like greens and things like that all the time, that there can be a downstream effect of antioxidants all day, every day. What do you think he meant by that?
Yeah, it's called a hormetic curve. A hormetic curve means function starts, it goes up, it peaks, and it drops back down. This occurs with antioxidants because we've become a little reductionist in us versus them in the concept of inflammation, right? It's very, all inflammation is bad. And that's not to say the opposite, where all inflammation is good either. Inflammation is a chemical signaling cascade that helps our body communicate with what's happening and what should be happening next. So for example, let's say I punched you in the arm as hard as I could and you swelled. Part of the inflammatory response of swelling has to do with recognizing the degree of damage, how we're going to respond to it, and what really happened. That's why there's chronic effects to chronic NSAIDs that can be deleterious. The same way with antioxidants. So what should happen is you try to pick the right antioxidant for the right job, and you try to do it when specific inflammation is high. So let's say you ate like absolute crap, just off the rails bender for 2 days. Not a bad idea for antioxidants. Jet lag, really bad sleep, not a bad idea. Excess muscle damage, which people oftentimes think is good, especially in the sports community, we've actually seen is actually bad. It doesn't make you adapt any faster. Phosphatidylserine in high doses of about a gram can be the primary and ideal combatant or antioxidant for the reactive oxygen species, the free radicals that occur in excess exercise. So ideally, it's like this balancing act, because if, let's say in an ideal world, we knocked out your immune system, or every time you went to exercise, we nulled the immune response, you wouldn't get better. People oftentimes thought it was our hormone systems, but that was shown not to be true. Even androgynous people with zero hormones in their body, can make muscular adaptation. So it's really our immune system. And that's, growth hormones, G coupled protein, IGFs, proliferative responses are all immune system mediated. You know what I mean? So that's like the caveat to really, I know I got on a little bit of a rant there, but that's the real caveat to making any diet or any adaptation go well. And that's where the antioxidants being properly timed comes into play.
How do you think somebody would go about just getting like insanely jacked off of this diet? Maybe there's a little bit more precaution, in terms of muscle loss, and maybe they are bringing in starches intentionally, as I mentioned earlier. Maybe you can comment on this. It's my understanding that starches just require a little bit more insulin, and in that case, sometimes insulin can be a great thing for people that are heavier. Maybe utilizing the starches, maybe they have to be a little bit more strategic, but utilizing them post workout seems like a really good idea for people that maybe want to, just they don't want to like wither away on this diet. They don't want to look like a fruitarian.
You know, uh, Insulin's gotten such a bad rap over the years. I feel so bad for that guy. I used to feel bad for cortisol, but I think some of it is our cultural problems. I don't think we have a cultural problem that makes us hate on insulin. I really think it's just misunderstood. Insulin must be present in some manner for plasma amino acids to travel and get to muscles. So there is always an argument here. I think what I said at the beginning, I probably said that a little too fast with the enterocytes and fruit and like getting out of it to the liver and the Cori cycle.
Hey,
But
you're
that's
super
literally
brain.
like
People,
a whole
if
year.
people can't hang, it's okay.
Just keep re-listening to it. That's a whole year
Right.
of exercise physiology right there. And the reason that's so important is because when we do these things, it tells us what we can and cannot do. Insulin is going to be necessary for starches because we're going to have a medium bell-shaped curve. We'll call it candy sugar, like a very sharp curve, like a V almost, like Cal Dietz's V upside down. And we'll call fruit as flat line as possible. Extremes are oftentimes good for diets. What happens with starches, they have a more medium bell curve to them. It's easy to eat a lot of them, and then you have a medium high glucose for a longer period of time. Whereas the benefit to starches is almost similar to the benefits of fruit, or sugars rather, is almost similar to the benefits of the fruit, is that it's in and out so fast that the presence of insulin is very small. Insulin is a natural hormonal combatant to norepinephrine, which is why so many diets have been like ragging on it. But we also need it to do other things. Glycogen sparing cannot occur without insulin. I've spoken a lot about glycogen sparing on your podcasts, so I won't get into that one too much. But basically, what we're looking at here is if you wanted to get maximally jacked, in an ideal world, I would do a small body part for 20 or 30 minutes with essential amino acids and creatine, with your sugars, and then train. And then do that for like a little bolus of the day. Then I would get a little more masticated protein and some fruit. And then I would go back to training. And I would run that cycle like back and forth as many times as you could until you showed some fatigue. Then when you got fatigued, I would overfeed you with protein and still go with starches and carbs. And maybe add a little of essential fatty acids based on how lean and how much total food and calories mattered. But I would like overfeed protein when lethargy and fatigue and soreness come in, and then get back to the cycle. I think the way we make change anytime, especially if you want to be a monster, is here's an adaptive cycle of the 2-coin theory. Break down, recover. That works ideally for you as an individual. And as you saw, Smelly, we did that stuff a lot. It's like, let's run this cycle 15 times in a row over 27 days. I just made that up, right? And then we should have made this specific enzyme that we want, for example, turn into 5 enzymes, let's say. And like you said, now we can reassess and see what we're playing with. So it's like short bursts of resistance training that don't fatigue you too much and just keep doing it again and again and again.
Guys, the reason why Superbrain's been on this show so many times is because he's one of the best in the world. When I was working with him, he would send me, a chart of like different days. This would be Monday, this would be Tuesday. And it was like I could sort of melt it into my own training because, he and I talked a lot and he helped me with the training aspects of stuff too. But I have my own vast knowledge of training, and he knows that I go off and just do smelly things here and there. And so he was like, hey, if you're going to do this style workout, take this kind of nutrition. And it was really nice how it was set up. And it reminds me a lot of Joel Green, who I've had on the podcast many times too. Joel's like, every day is a little different. And I think that's an amazing thing. So what you're saying, some people might be like, oh, EAAs and creatine. EAAs are not part of sugar fasting, but what you could do is you can do exactly what Superbrain laid out. The next day can be a full-on sugar fast. And I want you guys to really start to think for yourselves. You guys ask me a lot of questions, and it's awesome. And it's great that we have Superbrain here today. We can ask him a lot of questions, and we can learn. But I want you guys to take the knowledge that you're learning, and I want you to turn it into wisdom. And I want you to realize that you are actually way smarter than you think. Like, people that are listening to this podcast, maybe if it's their first time listening to this podcast, maybe they don't have some of the previous knowledge, but if they've been listening to this podcast or been listening to other podcasts that are similar, and you've been training for years, you guys already know. So people will send me, they'll say, hey, Sunday I like to go out with my family and just go get a nice brunch and just enjoy myself. Can I still do that? And I'll be like, fuck yeah, you can. That sounds great. Like, that's like, you're gonna eliminate that from your life. Like, please do not do that. Like, keep that. You're going to brunch with your family after church or something like that. It sounds incredible. Like, please continue to do that. And I'm glad that people are doing that, because they're starting to mention to me, hey, what if I sugar fasted just on Tuesday and Thursday, but I kept the other days vertical diet? I'm like, hey, amen. Sounds great.
Yeah, that's like what I said at the beginning, right? Beta oxidation is one of the primary biological cascades we want to promote for fat loss. So whether you do it A way, B way, A and B way, A, B, and C, just C, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. And that's why I think I struggle sometimes when people ask me what's the best diet. And it's like, man, I don't know. It's like whatever one induces beta oxidation for you. Like, and for some people, certain things are easier to cling to than others. Some people are like Smelly, where it's like seasonal. It's like, I'm doing this now, then I'm going to be the best at something else in a year or two. That's all more than okay. In fact, I think that's the secret to sustainability. I tell college athletes all the time, you're not a toaster. Just because, like, you didn't do something good once, I'm not going to throw you in the garbage. You're not horrible because you had one bad event, Like, when machines break, we usually throw them out. Like, you're a human being.
I love that. You're not a toaster. That's a great way of looking at it. How do we get good at this? Because that's a principle that you've been teaching me for a few years now. And you mentioned this to me before about getting good at eating protein, because a lot of people, maybe as of like 2 to 3 years ago, a lot of recommendations for people to really jack their protein up. And that's great. Like, I think that's, I still like that idea. I still believe in protein leveraging and stuff like that. But as you pointed out, if someone goes from having like 100 grams of protein a day to having like 300, like, there's going to be some problems if their body isn't used to it, and if the body doesn't have the right enzymes. How do we adapt? Is there, like, for some people that are hitting me up having digestive issues and all these things, should I just tell people, hey, look, man, why don't you try this for 3 to 5 days and just see how this feels? Because they're trying the sugar fast and they're just getting like crazy bloating, and sometimes they're not feeling well, maybe after eating like too much honey or something like that. Should there be some sort of for some of these people, should there be some sort of starting phase so they can get good at utilizing some of these sugars?
Yeah, totally. For example, this is like let's say you were to start it on Monday type of thing. This is something that'll be very different if you ate like crap the night before or not. We've seen that insulin resistance really starts like how quickly, we'll call it like hours, to really 36 to 48 hours of elevated glucose and triglycerides, elevated both, is where insulin resistance starts to come in. And I think that's a really paramount thing for the general public to understand. One, because it means one single day will never make you or break you. It's the synergy of multiple days in a row. And two, it's that both of these fuel sources can be leveraged. Both of them low bad, both of them high bad. Anywhere in between is probably the area you want to be in. So let's say you had like a friggin' pizza for dinner the night before, and you try to do your normal sugared fast, which might be 500 grams, but your glucose already started high and your triglycerides started high because of the pizza the night before. So I think exercise is wonderful because it'll always deplete your liver of glycogen at least a little bit, even if you did 2 minutes rest between bicep curls. So you're always kind of not getting into a place where you have a massive surplus, as long as you commit to that exercise. I think a great way to start, because, when we get good at, let's say, the low carb diet, you have to get good at eating a certain way and like getting used to the flavor profile and maybe being fuller immediately after, but longer time you don't. The way you get good at handling carbohydrates is, funny enough, getting your sugar low sooner after you eat them. So let's say you struggle, like you ate like a huge plate of fruit, like Smelly and Super Brain said at once. And you're like, dude, that made me feel horrible. And it's like, all right, you just couldn't handle it. I got wonderful business advice like a while ago, right? And they said, Andy, there's 10 floors to the building. You have something to learn on every single floor. You don't just get to take the elevator to the 10th floor just because you're super brain. He's like, you have to learn something from every single floor. And that's how enzyme, hormone, and any biological adaptation begins. So it's like, all right, let's say you went to the gym and you worked out pretty hard, and you had 2 scoops of Hydro Whey, like 50 grams of protein, and it hurt your stomach. That probably means that you're not even good enough at protein digestion to start working out really hard. So by proxy, you can't also worry about fat loss yet. I think people are switching too many things up at once. Let's digest sugar well. Let's start by having an apple and like a gutsy, maybe. It's a food product I found, like a little mashed up fruit, organic, with some prebiotic fiber. There's a million of those, right? Maybe have like 40 grams of carbs, mainly from fructose now. And then in 2 hours, do it again. And then in 2 hours, do it again. And track your glucose, because maybe you track ketones on the ketogenic diet, you track your biceps and like your muscle body comp if you're doing X, Y, or Z diet. Here, you're gonna track your glucose levels. I had 50 grams of carbs. What happened to me after? It's like, I felt amazing. And then it said my sugar was 75. It's like, wow, that's kind of probably a good thing to know. So then you eat more, and it's like, wow, it went over 100. I still felt good. And then you ate like a slob, and you got to 150, and you felt horrible. Then you learned about yourself better. You learned about how you digest those carbs better. And now, even cooler than that, in the future, you can know if you made progress or not. So it's like, all right, I lost 5 pounds. And more importantly, after 100 grams of carbs ingested, my sugar response was even better. So that means I can lose more weight in the future. It's easy to lose 5 pounds this week or next week. It's not easy to keep that up and to make it body fat and to do it for 12 years like Smelly has.
I think also too, another recommendation I have for some people that are just, feeling some weird effects. I think what you said right there was amazing. Like, if you do that 40 to 50 grams of carbohydrates, a bunch of times a day, I think you're off to a really good start. I can't see any reason why you're going to have real digestive issues unless you just haven't touched fruit in a really long time, because, maybe fructose is not too much different than lactose, because I know for myself, I haven't drank milk in a really long time. And so if I have like ice cream or milk, I'm going to have issues because my body does not know how to digest that anymore. It doesn't seem like I have the enzymes for that anymore. But if I prepare my body for that, and I utilize some strategies from Joel Green, because Joel helped me get rid of lactose intolerance like years ago, I'd have to go through that protocol again, and I'd have to drink a little bit of milk, and I'd have to have other dairy that's not as offensive. And so people are going to have to really find their way. I like the idea of the apple. Even though the apple's got like the pectin and stuff on the outside, you're just eating one. Don't eat 2 apples in a row. Like, that's probably going to blow your stomach up. But eat 1 apple, eat 1 orange. They both are fibrous, and see how your body reacts to it. And I think so much of this diet and so much of what I'm trying to promote and communicate is I want 2 things to happen, and they're both very, very important. I want you to have good energy levels, and I want you to be losing weight. I want the scale to be going downward. For the people that are interested in weight loss, that's what this diet is. This diet is mainly a weight loss protocol, and I'm sure I can build protocols and help people also gain weight and get more jacked, as you gave us a little insight into that. It's mainly a weight loss protocol. But in this protocol, if you're losing, 3 to 5 pounds a week, that's cool. But if you're not feeling good, that sucks. Like that's a really big hit. We can't have you like compromised. We want you feeling well. You should actually not only be feeling well, you should be feeling incredible. So there's so many different ways you can go. As I mentioned earlier, maybe you mix in like a little bit of starch so you kind of calm down some of those sugars that you're eating. Maybe you just have a little bit of vegetable. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but like maybe you have a little bit of vegetable. I've been doing this. I've been eating some pickles, which I think cucumbers are actually a fruit, but you get the idea. I've been having some vegetables, and they're prebiotic vegetables too. These are fermented vegetables that I'm eating as per your recommendation years ago. I've never stopped with the prebiotic vegetables, fermented vegetables. And so I'm doing that before I'm, enjoying a giant bowl of, I'm making these smoothies, and I'm dumping a smoothie on top of fruit because I thought to myself, like, this is the best way to do this. I want to actually eat and chew up these fibrous things, but I also kind of want to drink this and slurp this because it's delicious this way. So what are some of your thoughts on just maybe trying to slow down the freight train of the glucose coming in?
Yeah, graded exposure is everything. So it's like, the reason bodybuilders oftentimes get into weird meal plans is just, all right, my goal is to eat 70 protein, 200 carbs, 20 fat. It's like, damn. It's like, how is that going to go down? So I think graded exposure is the way to start. It's so easy to do 30 or 40 grams of carbs because you can get it anywhere. Let's say you really killed it. Let's say you need that 100 grams of carbs. Physical mastication is really important, not just for the rate at which it gets to us. Like, this will make me feel old.
Mastication,
but like,
chewing, right?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, not masturbation. Yeah, not none of that. But remember instantized oats, maybe a decade or so ago? Like they got huge and everyone's, oh, it ruins my stomach. It's because like you're not meant to get fiber in you that fast. Like same with green smoothies. Sometimes people have like weird responses to green smoothies. We don't get that in us typically that fast. Cellulose doesn't go down like that. So it's important to take care of your gut here. For example, if you have some like gram-negative anaerobic bacterias, maybe something like H. pylori, certain gut bacterias are going to flourish with excess carbohydrates and sugar. That's one of the benefits to some portions of the low-carb diet. But you do want to make sure that you can digest fiber well here. The fermented vegetables are going to promote, because when we go through de novo lipogenesis, when we're eating mostly carbs and low fat, a lot of our short chain fatty acids, propionates, butyrates, and this stuff are produced by bacteria. So they're doubling down on their work too. So we got to take care of them. And that's one thing I would recommend being like the thing here. Like if you're going to do like a pre-check, let's say, for if this is a good longer term diet for you, it would probably start with a stool test.
Yeah, get your poop checked.
Yes, exactly. And then like when it comes to looking at like how much is relative to how much you're doing. My friend Ethan Grossman's a pro bodybuilder now, and a long time ago he said advice. This was literally in college that he gave his clients is you got to earn the carbs. He goes like you don't just get them just because. Sure you get some for survival, but you got to earn those bad boys. So if you want to have a bowl of cereal, what did you do to deplete your liver and muscles to earn that?
Got to earn that bowl of cereal. Everyone hears cereal and they get so excited because I've been like eating a little bit of cereal here and there. And that's where the focus goes to. Like everyone's like, when do I get to eat my cereal? And it's hard, you're sharing a message like these messages, on YouTube, and this whole sugar fasting craze and experiment, I'll call it, has grown so rapidly that I'm talking to everybody. I used to kind of, when I started Superbrain, you remember, when I started, I was communicating with guys like you, and it was easy because I would say, hey, this is what you do. You want to get strong, you want to get big, do 5 sets of 5 and eat a lot of food, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many, I'm talking to such a diverse crowd now that, before a lot of the people that I told to do 5 sets of 5, they were already in the gym, they were already training, already had a couple years under their belt. They at least had some, education of what it was they were doing. Now the education level is 0 to like 500. It's crazy because there's some people like you that are influenced and encouraged by some of the stuff that I'm promoting, and then you'll say, oh well, shit, me and my wife will give this a try, why not? and you guys are doing it and you have experience with it in the past. And then there's also people that just have no experience at all, and they see me, eating honey, and then the next day they're like, just hammering honey, and you're like, holy shit, 1 tablespoon of honey has 17 grams of sugar. Honey actually has similar or even more fructose than high fructose corn syrup. It's really kind of amazing. The last thing I want to finish with is that a lot of talk has been centered around this idea of like FGF21, and I don't know because I only sent it to you a little bit ago. I know you're a busy guy and you're working with some really incredible athletes, and you have some incredible businesses that you're working on. But have you had a chance to look into this at all, this FGF21 and sort of what it does?
So funny enough, I was actually vaguely aware of FGF21 a little before you started doing this through the Clotho hormone. So fibroblast growth factors are a huge family of epigenetic or transcription factors. For those people who haven't heard that word before, it's basically the genetic chemical signaling of how things get carried out, like how employees read instruction manuals and then gain skills and are actual viable employees. So we actually need the receptor for FGFs to be activated first. We also need the Clotho hormone, which has a lot to do with aging and our kidneys, to be involved for FGF21 to kind of carry out its things. FGF got popular a little bit in research when ketogenics was popular, kind of combating it because they used it as a compensatory strategy. There's a lot of compensatory strategies, like I said at the beginning of this, and that's how and why we lose weight, but we're just doing it on purpose in a healthy, normalized manner. Whereas, for example, like actual FGF21 during starvation, if you were starving to death in the wild, is literally to keep you alive. It's weird, like, for example, obesity is weird, and like certain normal systems get turned on that wouldn't normally be. Same thing with like the ketogenic diet nowadays is not really a keto diet. Like, it's our modern, we made up keto diet. The ketogenic aspect of our biology is to save your life a long time ago. You know what I mean? So it gets a little hairy. But FGF21 is cool because it does a lot of different things in different areas. For example, it can act as what we call a paracrine hormone, meaning it's stimulated. It's, again, fake liver. This is my real liver. But it's stimulated in the liver. It's called what we call hepatokine. So MOTS-c is a mitokine. It's a chemical messenger, and the first prefix of the word tells you where. MOTS-c, mitokine, mitochondria. Myokines, like myostatins, muscles. We have cytokines, immune systems, and we have hepatokines or adipokines in our liver and fat cells, respectively. So when FGF21 leaves the liver, what it does to fat cells is it turns on uncoupling protein 1. Uncoupling protein 1 basically tells fat cells that they can start gaining heat as a resultant, which is a resultant's the word that's the end outcome of a chemical equation that can't be reversed. So we get this end outcome of these fat cells that get liberated, and that's through UCP1. It turns white into brown, and it does some little different things. That's what's called a paracrine hormone. The adipocytes are near and close to the liver, so it's close by. Sometimes they also use the term autocrine hormone for FGF21. Whereas endocrines are typically like brain to elsewhere. They have to travel really far. And FGF21 can basically act as a couple of different things. There's a lot of good to it. The bad is that the overexpression of it comes with glucocorticoids, cortisol, things that turn non-glucose things into glucose in a stressful manner. Is like if it gets way too high, it's hard to get it way too high. Originally, they thought it was going to be the next big anti-diabetes drug. It is stimulated in ketogenic diets compensatorily, but it's more the action and what's happening at the liver is what will determine if FGF21 is able to be activated and secreted or not. And like I said, that's predicated on the receptors availability and Clotho hormone availability.
You can use this in your next stand-up routine. What did FGF21 say to the fat cell?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to give that. You got to come to the comedy show if you want to hear the answer there. But
is it getting hot in here? Or is it just me? Get it? Because it's heating up because of metabolism?
That's a good one.
I don't know. Maybe we got to keep these jokes private to ourselves. I think people aren't. They're just. They're not ready for it.
And that's okay. That's a part of Smelly's leading and pioneering like the bioenergetic world in my mind. Like you've been a marathon runner, you're running fast and quite fast now and doing glycolysis, and not long before that you were a power lifter. Like you've hit the most elite point of every single energy system head, which most people don't do. Most people like pick what they're good at and stay in their lane. You find things that you like struggle with and then get good at them, which is really, really cool.
Thank you so much, man. It's always great to have you on the show. Where can people find you? I know you do some consulting and you have a couple of businesses cranking these days. So where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, go superbrain@gmail.com is the best way to try to rattle me down for a consult. I just kind of closed the doors for consults for the last couple of months because I was really, really busy and there was a ton of people. I'm about to open the doors back up. So probably by the time people hear this, they can reach out for one. But ultimately, it's really it. I don't do a whole lot of social media, but I really love helping people. So if you need help, I will find a way to help you. But my businesses that are coming out, I have a really cool food product that's coming out. My nonprofit's about to be open to the world. It's about neurobiology and autism. I have a cool foot-related product that's coming out for sports and a couple other things that'll all be public very, very soon.
Yeah, you work with a lot of people, but I know one of the things you got very passionate about the last several years is golf, and so that should be said that you're working with some really high-level golfers. Thanks again, man, for being on the show. Love you, Super Brain. You're a great friend and a great person to have on the show. You're part of the Super Friends clique that we have developing here on the Mark Smelly Bell YouTube channel.
I love that. It's absolutely my pleasure, and wish you the best as always, Smelly. Thanks for having me.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
I think you might have to stay here.